A word to the wise. I think it's my turn to read.
I think so.
This is an explicit podcast tackling content with adult themes, as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us. That point this week would be through chapter 75 of Brandon Sanderson's The Hero of Ages.
Hey there, this is Cross.
And I'm PJ.
And we are Words and Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. You should think of us as your intoxicating weekly book club.
You should also know about us that we're very good at planning and deciding who's going to read things at the top of each episode.
It's so true. We are so good at doing all of the plans all of the time.
Mm-hmm. We have our notes all nice and like not color coordinated, but my stuff's always bold. And Crossan's is always not bold, but that doesn't apply until like we're in the book part of the notes. Otherwise, it's just kind of there. And we don't do anything else indicating who's doing what. It's great.
You raise a really fair point about that one break of logic that totally exists inside of the notes, and I fixed it. But you were 100% correct until 10 seconds ago. There was no logic in this place. Mm-hmm. So with that, today is our 10th and penultimate episode discussing The Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson, and we're going to chat about chapters 66 through 75. But before we do that, PJ, what are you drinking?
Water. I got a big old glass of water, and by glass I mean literal vase, like a flower vase that I've filled with water. And yeah, I'd say it's a good 40 ounces. I've filled it twice now, but it looks like a normal glass in my hand.
It is comedically tiny in your hand. Like, it looks like a normal glass in your hand, and it is 100% a vase. There were flowers in it when I was there. I remember because they were falling over, and I had to try to bounce them. Yeah. And it was annoying. But that is the vase.
This is that vase.
Yeah.
It's just in my hand. Like, here's it compared to the soda that I'm drinking afterwards.
For all of you listeners of whom I can obviously not see, the soda can very easily fits inside of the cylindrical vase, as well as is about third of the height, close-ish.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So, but speaking of that soda, I've got my third and final variety of Culture Pop soda. So this is watermelon, lime, and rosemary. I've been really digging on rosemary lately. I've had it in foods that I've been eating, drinks I've been drinking. Today it was in the potatoes that we made. We've been throwing rosemary on everything. It's great.
Cool. Rosemary's really tasty.
Mm-hmm. And we've got a plant outside that we just keep grabbing.
Nice. I am having a Shirley Temple Black is what I'm calling it, because that is Shirley Temple's full name. Really, it's a spin on a Shirley Temple using the Monday Zero Alcohol Gin. So really easy, really straightforward. 2 ounces Monday Zero Alcohol Gin, 1 ounce lemon, 0.75 ounces of simple syrup, a splash of grenadine for that classic color, and then club soda to the top. I prefer it this way. Prefer a little bit tamer on the pomegranate add, if that makes sense, the pomegranate flavor add from the grenadine. And so I think that going with the regular sugar gave it a little bit more of that spirit, quote, spirit forward, because obviously no alcohol in it. So I think it's a great mocktail.
Nice. Yeah, I thought about doing another drink with that spiritless. I didn't have the time to really like dig in and see what those flavors would work well with. So I might try to do that.
Cool. And then per usual, having a tea, same tea that I've had every episode, because I have the same tea every episode, guys. Literally every time we do this. Before we talk about the chapters, PJ, how'd you feel about this week's reading?
A lot of feelings. Stressed out in some cases. Oh man. I'm really happy with it. There's some crazy shit that happens, and I just want more of it. So I think that's a good thing, and I think I'm just gonna stick with happy. Stressed out, terrified. I thought for sure you would have stopped us like at the end of Vin getting all of her bones broken. Like I figured you would have stopped us at that point if I were to put together the breaks and everything, but you didn't. And I thank you for that, for my own like personal health and safety. So yeah, I don't know. Happy in a weird way. Happy about the fact that this exists. I think. I
find, yeah, I mean, okay, fair point. That was a potentially logical point to end the reading at. You're right. I could have ended it right when she catches Marsh's hand after having all of her limbs broken. But that felt, for a couple of reasons, that felt like the wrong thing to do, because it does end in a very climactic note for Vin in chapter 72. However, I don't think it quite gets us there with setting up Elend and then also the sort of climax that happens around Sazed as well. I think that we're not left on a good enough cliffhanger with Sazed to go into next week, if that makes sense, versus going to 75. I feel like we get a good enough beat on Elend and on Sazed to kind of know where we're going forward. So
yeah, I think that's true.
Plus, chapter 73 is so fucking good.
Which one's that again?
Vin flying around.
Yeah.
That's the one where Vin is, killing everybody. And that chapter of like just counting down, we'll talk about it obviously, but that chapter is so good and I think is really important to like have inside of this. So I had also considered ending it there, but that felt like a little bit too hopeful of a note to put it out on. And I really like the idea of like our last thing with Vin this week being the poof.
That's at the end of 73.
I know. I'm saying I like that that's our last thing with Vin this week.
Oh, yeah.
I'm saying I like that is. Yeah.
Yep.
Because it leaves a good mystery for Vin. It leaves a good mystery for Sazed. It leaves us questioning what the fuck's going to happen to Elend. You know, there's a lot of different little bits and beats here. So,
yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Should we get into those bits and beats?
Let's talk about those bits and beats. Okay, cool. We start with chapter 66 here in our breakdown. We move to Sazed and Tensoon riding off in the mists. And I say riding because Tensoon has made himself into a buff-ass horse, having merged the hefted mass of a pig to help him bulk up the horse's muscles. More than worth it for that extra speed. This is just what I forgot about this. And it's such a funny thing to add. It makes a lot of sense. It's necessary to move around the story really effectively. What'd you make of it?
This is a mechanic that we have been sorely deprived of when it comes to the Khandra in general. Like as mist wraiths, they're able to like absorb all these different bones and all these different bodies and stuff. But I don't think we've had any situations where a Khandra has absorbed more than one body. And holy shit, does it make sense? But then again, this is the only like non-human form that we've seen a Khandra take in the part of Tensoon being the wolfhound and now this buff-ass horse. So there's not really a need to take additional mass from a pig and like tack it onto a human. You're not gonna build a fucking bodybuilder, like just have Arnold show up in the middle of the fight, though that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, I just feel like this was a mechanic that we didn't get to explore that much, but I'm glad that we get to here.
It is neat. I think that that's a great call to the sort of, I don't want to call it like an homage, but it is like a coming back to almost the mist wraiths and like this idea that, oh, they're more connected than you thought, right? And I think this does justice to kind of coming back and being like, yeah, they are connected. That's right. They are kind of similar. And this idea, too, that they can take mass from something else to bulk up another creature or to increase their own collective mass was something that was hinted at previously earlier in this book, but was not fully explored until now. And now it feels great.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Overall, really dig it.
But buff-ass horse is a great description.
He's a thick horse. 2 C's. Somebody, somewhere. Here's my request.
Do not.
Draw thick ass Tensoon. But he's got to be like biting his lip with the horse teeth.
What the fuck?
He looks over himself. Anyway, all right, there you go. There's your horrified imaginings.
Well, now we have a little bit more insight into what Crossland likes. How dare you tap our listenership to try to get off like that?
Fuck you. So we also get a lot of descriptions about the process of becoming a Khandra as well during this ride on Mr. Thick-Ass Horse, and how weak they are compared to the other creations of the Lord Rulers. These are like the blessings are small metal spikes that make them much, much more subtle than any of the other gifts that are kind of derived from Ruin. It also clarifies the strength of these blessings and that they store their power forever, but at a much weaker percentage compared to the bursts provided by Feruchemy or Allomancy.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's subtle because of the number of spikes, right? Not because of the size of them. I feel like we had this conversation last week, and I don't remember what we actually landed on.
I think the text implies both.
Okay. Because I thought earlier it had explicitly said that the size of the spike didn't matter. But now I remember we went back through again.
That was in relation to Ruin exerting the type of influence that Ruin wanted to exert. That was the idea. Because it's all that spike, the size didn't matter for the goal that was meant to be accomplished. That was what Marsh said basically in that moment in context.
I gotcha. Now I understand more. Okay, so small little things. This is kind of tangentially related, but you know how the Koloss have been like building their own numbers back up by using their spikes? Mm-hmm. Like the spikes of the fallen ones. And that wasn't necessarily by design. Like they should have just kind of fallen to themselves after the Lord Ruler died because their numbers wouldn't be replenished ever. Is that also true for Khandra? Do we have anything contextually saying anything like that? Like they wouldn't be able to give themselves their own, like bestow blessings upon mist wraiths using like the blessings from fallen Khandra? Like I know they can use other Khandra's blessings, but I don't know if that's been talked about at all.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to kind of work my way through this. I don't think it has been talked about at all, which I think is kind of the case. Like we don't really have we haven't gotten too much on the reproduction of mist wraiths or of Khandra outside of the fact that we know that they reproduce. That's really the only.
We did get a scene where they were like, maybe it was the sevenths or the ninths were leading a new generation of like not quite fully formed mist wraiths. Right?
Yes. Well, Khandra, but yeah.
Or Khandra, but could we assume that I guess we can't assume how long they were in that state for.
Yeah, we know that they are somehow reproducing. We know that, and we know that they are still converting mist wraiths into Khandra, just not at like what rate or the total number or like how any of that functions. We don't have the specifics on yet.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think so. There's despite this being a very Khandra heavy section, there's a lot to explore still within the Khandra.
Yeah.
So I really like that this clarifies one of the important things about, I think, hemalurgy, which is that the power is just given by the spike, and it enhances the powers therein as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel like we knew that, right?
It never, not so explicitly, if that makes sense, but pretty much like we had came to the conclusion, if that makes sense, made sense of how like a lot of this works.
Like with Spook and with Quellion.
Well, we knew how the powers were stolen and then given, right? But the question is like the power lasts forever was kind of the difference, right? So like there's no time limit, there's no consumption on the power, which is what I was trying to kind of get at. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, which also I think begs an interesting question about the blessings themselves and why there's no allomantic anything involved with the blessings. Like clearly they're not it doesn't seem like they're stealing pewter, you know what I mean, to have the blessing of presence or whatever it is. Potency. Right. Sorry, potency.
Yeah, there's that. Going back to the Spook thing real quick.
Mm-hmm.
He had to take and burn pewter.
Yeah.
Should he not have had to?
No, he should have. That was my point. is that like it's clearly different when you steal an Allomantic capability versus where the blessing's power comes from.
Okay. Now I understand
That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
So the Inquisitors have to like have a huge reserve of metals as well?
Yeah. Vin has to steal a vial of metals off Marsh.
Yes, she does.
Yeah. So
useless fucking spikes aren't even given power.
Right.
Still gotta fuel up this car.
Mm-hmm. Well, and ferrochemy, right? Like all the ferrochemical powers still function the same despite them being spikes that are physically implanted. Like they still have to store whatever the ability is that they've stolen.
Right.
So it all ties back.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I think blessings are so interesting, is because where did those powers come from? Like to what degree, or who were they stolen from, or like what exactly? You know, like that's kind of the question, is like where.
How were those spikes created?
Yeah, we have all these other precise readings on hemalurgy, but I feel like blessings are the least explained and follow a slightly different rule set, which is interesting. So
you're gonna drop some knowledge on me next episode, huh? Maybe.
Who knows? Okay, but the biggest reveal of this chapter. Yeah, I'm always gonna drop some knowledge on you in the next episode. You just don't know what knowledge it's gonna be. Fight me. But the biggest reveal is the homeland's proximity to the pits of Hathsin. Tensoon takes off and Sazed enters the homeland, here to explore and learn things about his people. It feels, finally, like our boy is back at his full scholarlessness.
Gotta love Scholar Boy Sazed. Transforming.
Evolving. Who's that Terrace? Anyway, okay.
I think this is an especially fun reveal, considering the Terrace people have moved to this area as well. And that has not yet been addressed. We don't know if the Khandra know that the Terrace homeland is now at the pits of Hathsin. And I'm excited for shit to go down in that respect. So
it is a really interesting change. Like the Terrace people are all in one spot in theory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially with Sazed here.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that they've all kind of gravitated towards the same point. And it seems like we're setting up a final battleground with the way that, you know, Ruin's been chasing after Atium. So
yeah, it does feel like that, huh?
Mm-hmm. We'll get to that later, but you know, it's interesting that it's so like what was your first thought when you were passing through this and you're like, oh, right next to the pits, huh?
My thought went back to one of my predictions, which was the fact that there's a second pool there.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, oh, maybe that idea has merit.
You have no idea how angry people were.
Really?
Oh yeah. If you're like, fuck that. That's bullshit. I was like, fuck that. That's bullshit. But, I mean, it's very interesting. Obviously, that's not resolved, and we don't have a pool there. We know that that's a thing, but...
Mm-hmm. I feel like I was really flippant about it, too.
Kinda. Well, you were like, well, it seems very clear that there was a pool there. Yeah. Cool. With that, we go into chapter 67. Kolos also had little chance of breaking free. 4 spikes and their diminished mental capacity left them fairly easy to dominate. Only in the throes of a blood frenzy did they have any form of autonomy. 4 spikes also made them easier for Allomancers to control. In our time, it required Duralumin to push to take control of a Khandra. Kolos, however, could be taken by a determined regular push, particularly when they were afraid.
So I think there's a few different things I want to talk about for this.
Mm-hmm.
One of which is based on the language used in our time. So that gives more sort of background, I guess, on how far in the future this person is writing from. It feels much more distant now based on that. Like we knew it was ahead of time, but this feels like generations have gone by, maybe. I don't know. How in our time feels very separate. Yeah. But I had been curious a little bit, just kind of, I don't remember how often I actually brought it up, but curious about their ability to break control and kind of push back against that control, like during blood frenzies and stuff like that. And this section made me think about that more and sort of come to the realization that they're controlled under emotional allomancy. So it makes sense and is more natural in my mind that high emotions could kind of overcome that control. So I don't think I have anything very specific to tie it to for that logbook entry, but just in general, it sparked that sort of thought process.
That idea that, well, the other interesting thing about the tie between emotional elemency and the number of spikes and the ability to be influenced, I think, is a fascinating one, especially the way that you kind of brought up this idea of basically the lack of control over the mind's emotions makes them more vulnerable because they're more fragmented, which I think gets into some other really interesting things that I don't think we have enough to talk about yet.
All right.
But it makes my brain spin in ways that I hadn't thought. And then the way that you drew those connections, I was like, oh, that's an explanation for that. So, yep, we'll get there eventually.
Cool.
God damn it. There's one fruit fly. Won't fuck off. Cool. All right.
Hunting a fruit fly on camera.
A single fruit fly that keeps flying in front of my fucking face. Get back here. Where are you? Motherfucker. Cool. All right. So we move to Elend and Vin over top of Fadric City. Vin is playing at continuing to fool Ruin in hopes to prevent the Colossus from attempting to take the city. Of course, these thoughts and reflections are interrupted as an earthquake bursts forth from the world, shattering the fortifications, some of it tumbling to the ground. It seems as though the end of the world really is upon us.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to think that there's something to those problems that the world's facing. Like, I think it might be more than just like circumstance.
Yeah.
I think something's happening, man.
I think this is the consequence of something happening. There's some cause and effect here. Weird.
It's a natural cycle.
Oh, it's all a natural cycle. Yeah. They'll explain it away in the news. It'll be, don't worry about it. I also immediately went to real world parallels, and I was thinking about the British heat wave. People being like, oh, it's very close to the heat wave that happened back in the 70s. And I was like, oh yeah, that one day where temperatures peaked up to 38 degrees, and it was very clearly a freak thing versus 40 degrees sustained for a week. Crazy. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's different.
I don't know, man. Look at the fossil records.
For the listeners at home, I just slow blinked PJ's fossil records comment, and we're going to leave it right there. Okay. Because, come on, folks, if you can't get on the climate change trend, we have to do something, fuckers, so that we don't have earthquakes shattering our fortresses.
Or just help it along. We should really usher it farther.
Yeah.
Just hit the big old reset button.
I was going to make a plastic straw joke, but I couldn't think of one that is going to hold water.
Continue.
That's kind of a funny joke. Anyway.
You don't get to say that to your own joke.
I just did. Vin realizes what has to be done here, though, of course. A distraction has to be made to pull Ruin away from Elend and everyone else so that they can potentially make an escape and take the focus off of Fadric's. So she takes off with a ploy, mentioning to Elend out loud that she knows where the ATM is and has to go get it so that they can use it. Of course, we later learned that that Ruin mostly takes the bait here, which I think speaks to the degree of desperation that Ruin is in.
Yeah. And I mean, we don't know what sort of level of attention is being put on every individual that he's watching. Mm-hmm. Probably a lot more on Vin than most people, but he's still got split attention in general. So understandable to not be able to pick up on nuances. Really, really clever tactic by her. I was waiting for some sort of trickery like this, and I think this was done really cleanly. The explanation and sort of the inner monologue of Vin, though, felt really weirdly heavy-handed for what we've seen from Brandon in the past. Talking about how this was a connection of love, and of course Ruin would never be able to understand it because of that. It just felt different and weird. Fine, but off for some reason.
Yeah, I have thoughts that I have written down at length of my thoughts. This is one that I want to save until we're done to fully talk about. But I will say now, I agree with you. I do think it's a little heavy-handed, and I think that it is a little... I believe it's true. I believe that the characters in this situation believe and kind of think this way. But this chapter, that conclusion being drawn here feels like rushing to something as opposed to giving it its time and due in a almost more natural way throughout the chapter. Like, this chapter is very short. I think it's maybe 7 pages, if that. Not even. I don't think it's really a short chapter, and it feels like if this is the intent to kind of have this feel like a goodbye, which is what it feels like right now, doesn't feel very satisfactory in its own way, because it feels like it should have been building in a different way, or like had, I don't know, a little bit more direct an emotional exchange between the two, as opposed to a kind of in-head expression.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there for sure. Cool. All right. With that, we move into chapter 68, short chapter. We have a bunch of short chapters this week. Like I said last week, it's like we have 10 chapters to cover, but in reality, it's like our usual average of like 6 or 7 based on, page count. So,
right.
With that, we have our logbook here, and they're all really long this week, guys. I apologize. So, doing my best. When the Lord Ruler offered his plan to his Ferrochemist friends, the plan to change them into Mistrates, he was making them speak on behalf of all of the land's Ferrochemists. Though he changed his friends into Kandra to restore their minds and memories, the rest he left as non-sentient Mistrates. These bred more of their kind, living and dying, becoming a race unto themselves. For these children of the original Mistrates, he made the next generation of Kandra. However, even gods can make mistakes, I have learned. Rashik, the Lord Ruler, thought to transform all of the living Ferrochemists into Mistrates. However, he did not think of the genetic heritage left in the other Terrace people, whom he left alive. So it was that Ferrochemists continued being born, if only rarely. This oversight cost him much, but gained the world so much more.
Fun question.
Mm-hmm.
Mistrace can die, yes?
I would assume.
I'd assume so. If they couldn't, like if they were also immortal, then it's possible you could like reawaken all of the original generation of Ferrochemists.
It's true. I want to bring something up. Immortal doesn't mean you can't kill them. Yeah, I was going to say, because it doesn't mean invulnerable. Yeah, because like the Kandra can be killed. We've actually seen one be killed.
Yes, right. But they are explicitly called immortal, so I was trying to evoke the same similarity.
Yeah, I think that they do share that similarity. I think it's the biggest difference between the two is the consciousness aspect, because they kind of walk around just eating whatever's in the way.
Right. So,
as it's alluded to,
there could hypothetically be an ancient ass Mistwraith that just is a Ferrochemist from 1,000 years ago.
Could be Quan.
Quan could be there.
Mm-hmm.
Quan wasn't part of that crew?
No. He was Elendi's like advisor.
Right. Yep.
But he was not, he did not go up on the mountain with him. Instead, he was writing warnings because he'd been trying for years to denounce him since, saying that someone else was the hero, etc.
That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Maybe they just have Quan in a cage somewhere, like waiting for the opportunity. Yeah, but forgetting the recessive genes in the gene pool, like Punnett squares are like 10th grade, man. You got to remember that shit.
It's the easiest like genetic math in the world. Come on, Lord Ruler, you really didn't get a genetic breakdown while you were up there in the sky holding preservation's powers. Come on.
Too bad, so sad.
What a dunce. What a dunce. So getting into the chapter itself, Sazed is led through the homeland to the Trust Warren and has his first interaction with the second generation. Kanpar, as we know, is an absolute piece of shit. As their kind of conversation goes on, of course. Sazed, however, explains his role in Terra Society as a keeper, but one of religion specifically, to try to get at the why of why he is here in this moment. And it's because there is this one single religion that has survived the Lord Ruler's rule. And it is the Terrace religion, the religion that the first generation and that the Kandra hold as their own. So he needs to talk with the only surviving religion.
Yeah.
And interrogate the last one.
Yeah, that's very true. Didn't we talk at one point about some far off villages having other religions yet?
That there was a potential to, yeah.
Oh, but that proved to not be the case.
I think the book makes mention of like life at the poles or something like that too. And there's like,
Okay. Yeah.
There are probably other religions, but as Sazed is immediately aware of them, this is the one.
Right. But yeah, fuck Kanpar. Just garbage bag filled with bones. So I find it interesting that he explicitly asked to talk to the firsts.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't address that. They just like act like they're talking. Like they just basically ignore that part of the request. And I don't know. That was frustrating.
Yeah, it's very frustrating because we know how big of a piece of shit Kanpar is from the earlier part of the book with Tensoon. So it's just like, really, guy, really, you got to do this. But yeah, it's very frustrating. Of course, Kanpar doesn't bend to anyone's gums flapping whatsoever, and probably just hears Charlie Brown-esque wah 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 whenever anyone speaks, because he completely ignores, like you're saying, Sazed's requests. But the first, of course, hear Sazed and what he's asking for, and we get our first look at them as they tell the seconds to leave the room. They're dressed in their original bones and refer to Sazed as a world bringer. And so they begin to break down and interrogate the Terrace religion. And this is Sazed's little bit here. He gets to interrogate the one final religion, the only living religion. I guess it's not the only living religion. Technically, people worship both Kelsier and, but it's the last one that he hasn't interrogated.
Mm-hmm. I really like the firsts. The kindly old man, the old grandmothers. I think they're all men, actually, aren't they?
I don't know. I would say that they probably mostly are, because they're referred to originally as pack men in the first book and whatnot. But I'm curious now that you bring that up. But continue with the
other reason why I have that assumption is because they just assume that the Hero of Ages will be a man as well, and that seems like a very male thing to do, just historically. But
fair point.
I'm conflicted about that love for them, because they did our boy dirty when they had the opportunity to like pardon Tensoon and hear him out. Actively decided not to. That's a fair point, actually. I hadn't fully contemplated that. It is interesting that they deny Tensoon the right to a trial, effectively. But I think that might be because they just weren't ready to hear the truth. They weren't ready for it. And now that they're having other people come and bring more than one piece of evidence, I think that's maybe why they're bending a little bit more directly. Okay. I can believe that, but still. If we're gonna call Kanpar a piece of shit for that, it's hard not to do that for these kindly old people as well. It's true. They did fuck up, but at least it seems as though they're admitting that they were, wrong to deny. Yeah. Maybe. It's a small difference. Mm-hmm. That said, they're referred to as 10 Pac-Men, so there's no further clarification on whether or not any sort of genders. So okay, gotcha. That's how it goes. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot here that I'm really excited to talk about with them, but obviously that comes later. So we continue grinding forward as these chapters do. I actually do want to keep talking about the gender thing in a different reason. I believe this is where Sazed starts talking about how they don't have traditional genitalia, but they still like have genders, and it's hard to tell why or how, like what the differentiator is. But that gets brought up a few different times here, so I'm expecting there to be something soon. Yeah, it is interesting. He does. I think this is the time that he brings it up, because he's like, they're kind of all over the place. And I think he brings it up again later. I want to bring something up that I just noticed when I was reading. Small thing, right? But similar comparison. Later, we're going to talk about this in a second. Elend mentions, I'm a bastard, a composition of a bunch of different things. But Sazed has a similar reflection here. He goes, it was a strange experience for Sazed. He had been many things in his life: rebel, servant, friend, scholar. It's kind of the same sort of bullet list, you know what I mean? Like, they don't directly overlap between the two of them, but it's like... yeah. It's just the other composition of personality that we see between these characters. I just thought that was a fun parallel. Yeah, that I noticed. Yeah, I agree. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. We're going to move on to chapter 69 here. Hey, nice. All right. The question remains, logbook here. The question remains, where did the original prophecies about the Hero of Ages come from? I now know that Ruin changed them, but did not fabricate them.
Who first taught that a hero would come, one who would be an emperor of all mankind, yet would be rejected by his own people? Who first stated he would carry the future of the world on his arms, or that he would repair that which had been sundered? And who decided to use the neutral pronoun, so that we wouldn't know if the hero was a woman or a man?
We're talking all kinds of gender today.
Yeah, the book does.
Mm-hmm.
We're using the book's interpretation of gender, of course. So that's like, it is what it is at the product of its time. If anything, you would imagine Kandra could be genderless or choosing a gender in kind of the way that they manifest themselves. So,
right. My only thought is if they can be awoken in some way, like brought back to humanity in a way where they would have traditional genitalia. Like I'm wondering if that's something that's going to happen. Like I have inklings of like ideas of what's going to happen with this.
Okay.
Weirdly. And I don't think it matters at all, but you're right. I think based on what we have from the Kandra at this point, they should basically just exist in that space.
Right. Like a non-identifying, or like they could non-identify, they could identify whichever way. Like it doesn't, it is what it is.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But
and this is obviously oddly specific about the man or woman thing, neutral pronoun or otherwise. But it does at the very least, because we don't have anyone that is non-identifying inside of the story. It does beg the question of which of our characters is it?
Yes. Yes, it does. But I think there's something more to the comment about we'd always assumed it'd be a man than just, that's how these old people read things. I think I think we're missing something. And I think there's something else pointing to it as a male terrorist philosopher.
Yeah. What do you think is pointing that way?
I don't know yet. I think it's a document that we're missing. Like some knowledge that they have that hasn't been documented and kept. So all we're seeing is this neutral pronoun hero of ages thing. But I'm wondering if there's something specific that's lost.
Okay. Yeah. Something that's been kind of lost in time or in some other way, shape, or form. You feel like this would be kind of you feel like this would kind of be the truth of the matter, though, when we really get to the conversation with the Kandra later.
I have learned that you could wait until the last fucking page and still get shit dropped on you from Branderson. So I am not taking into consideration at all how close we are to the end of the book.
Okay. Fair enough. Cool. All right. So we go into the rest of chapter 69 here, and we're back with Marsh, of whom Mr. Branderson says is literally hating himself. I think that this is, we were talking about heavy-handed. I think this is maybe the worst case of tell not show instead of the entire book, in which it's difficult, and I understand why it would be very difficult right here to do it any differently, but because he can't do anything, right? He's locked inside his own body, so he has no ability to make change or do change or show frustration. But I do think that leading in this way is just so direct that it's like, okay, I get it, because you told me, not like you didn't express it in a way that, I don't know. This is an oddly specific complaint, but it's one that we get here. But we do get a unique taste from that perspective that I find really important and interesting. It's this idea that Ruin truly fears Vin when she did the duralumin push into Marsh's emotions and grabbed control of him, seized that control for a brief moment. It struck Ruin and created fear in him.
Yeah, that's a twist, man. Like, what could she do? This is a god. This is a force of nature. Like, this is not something that any single being shouldn't be able to strike fear into it. This is fucking crazy. So I'm confused. I'm excited, but I'm confused.
Okay. All right. I mean, we know that the god has a body.
We do. In a less traditional sense, though.
I mean, a body fell out of the mist when preservation died.
Yeah. Good point.
Boop. Boop. But fair point. I mean, it's a good thing to be afraid of. So, this entire chapter, I think, does a really good job of painting the kind of corner that Marsh is in a big way, and how he really has very little impact and can have very little impact in his world. But Marsh is sent on a very specific mission here as well, to go kill the man of whom is holding on to the letter that Spook had spoken of out loud. And so he knows that there is something important on that letter that is going to be delivered to Vin, and Marsh is sent to kill Goradel and does dispatch him with relative ease. Although I will say, Goradel puts up a pretty good fight for a non-Allomancer. And by non-Allomancer, I mean not showing any Allomantic capability at the moment. So, yeah.
At the moment.
Well, yeah, he's dead, so I guess never mind. But it's really sad because, you know, we've been with Goradel since the end of that first book, right? Like, he's always been a character in the backdrop, doing important things, running important errands, kind of the errand boy, but like in a very real and useful way inside of the story. And so it's a sad moment to lose him, but at the same time, this is a critical delivery of information to Marsh, to have him read this letter out loud so that Ruin knows, but in commanding him to read it out loud, Marsh also internalizes those words, and it helps fuel his act of defiance later.
Yeah, it does. I would wonder, though, if it crossed his mind at all that he could have just said the wrong thing in this moment.
That he could have just lied?
Yeah.
I don't think he can push back that way against Ruin. Like, Ruin seems to know all of and be able to control so much of his intent, but the only thing he can't do, I guess, is he can't see. So I don't know. Yeah, fair point.
Yeah.
He maybe could have lied.
That's a good point, too, though. Yeah. Yeah.
He might have been able to detect it. I don't know. That's a tough one. It's kind of like Marsh is at this point where he has to choose when to shoot his shot, right? Is this where he's going to shoot his shot? Is this going to save everyone?
Maybe.
You know? Maybe.
But I don't know. What was on this again?
This was an explanation as to the metal leading Spook to also hear a voice in his head, and for it to have also been the same voice that Quellion was hearing at the same time. The thing we fight is real. I've seen it. It tried to destroy me, and it tried to destroy the people of Urteau. It got control of me through a method I wasn't expecting. Metal, a little sliver of metal piercing my body. With that, it was able to twist my thoughts. It's really just a warning about the piercings, right? And their importance.
Right, and that's what fuels Marsh's decision to pull out the earring later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and then specifically he remembers that. And I think it's also great that it's Marsh that reads this letter from Spook, too, because it's like, Marsh is still it's so unfortunate because of the way the story treats Marsh, and it has to because he's a vestige of Ruin, but he's still a member of the crew. And we get that in the later flashback when it's, you know, more about the way that he kind of abandoned everything that he loved and gave up. But yeah, it just oh, Marsh.
Poor guy.
Yeah. Dang. So,
ding,
all right.
dong.
Anything else on Marsh in this chapter? This nice 69 chapter?
No, I think we're good.
Cool. All right. With that, we go into chapter 70 in the logbook. Quellion actually placed his spike himself, as I understand it. The man was never entirely stable. His fervor for following Kelsier and killing the nobility was enhanced by Ruin, but Quellion had already had the impulses. His passionate paranoia bordered on insanity at times, and Ruin was able to prod him into placing that crucial spike. Quellion's spike was bronze, and he made it from one of the first Allomancers he captured. That spike made him a seeker, which was one of the ways he was able to find and blackmail so many Allomancers during his time as King of Urteau. The point, however, is that people with unstable personalities were more susceptible to Ruin's influence, even if they didn't have a spike in them. That, indeed, is likely how Zane got his spike.
So if they don't have the spike, but they can still be influenced, how does that communication happen?
I would think of it, or the way that I think of it, I should say, is more as like almost a form of emotional allomancy or similar, right?
Okay.
He's vulnerable, so it's like pushing in a direction. If that makes sense. If you're one with a broken mind, and so you're able to just kind of nudge as this power in the direction that you want. It's my assumption.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Makes sense to me.
So there's your Zane explanation.
Zane's explanation
as to why he did what he did.
Yeah.
Cool.
What a crazy person. But also this paints Quellion very differently than what we had assumed. Because our assumptions my assumption going back to the last couple weeks or whatever it was, last week maybe, was like, oh, he's actually a pretty level-headed dude and genuinely wants the best for this community, and that intent is being twisted by Ruin, when in reality that's kind of the case, but he was basically on the path towards it anyway.
Yeah, he was on a bad path regardless, I think, is kind of the way that this paints it, right? Like, he may have had good intentions, but his mind was so broken. And when you read about I think one of the things that paints this picture for me is the way that they're brought up, right? Like, specifically, the both Beldra and Quellion have this super messed up home life. The situation of, like, basically being, like, half Ska, half nobleman, and being, like, lied to by their parents for a very long time, and then almost being executed, and then trying to keep their, like, position of power, or, like, trying to keep some, authority over power in this moment of insecurity. It makes a lot of sense to me as to why Quellion would go and place his Spike, given the backstory that we get from Beldra.
Mm-hmm.
Someone is lighting off fireworks. Anyway.
Shoot back. Get your gun.
I don't think it's catching it. Okay, fine. It's just loud for me. Yeah. It caught those. Those are 2 in a row. Anyway, it'll be fine. I'll cut it out. So, yeah, I don't know. I guess my core point being, like, it does paint Quellion more negatively, but I can understand why Quellion was broken in the first place, if that makes sense. Like, I have a better understanding emotionally of where Quellion was at and why he could be led very easily to make that decision, because it is something that gives him control. And so that nudge feels very... I still think he's a good person with the wrong mind frame or the wrong mindset going into it, if that makes sense. Good intentions, but yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So one of the things that I find really interesting, I was thinking about it reading it this week. This book doesn't have any human villains, actually. Any genuinely bad humans in it.
Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Well, kind of Quellion.
Kind of, but again, like, that is kind of hand-waved away by this idea that we're talking about, where it's like, oh, it's Rune's influence, Quellion is maybe the closest to a genuinely bad person that we have, but again, you can blame a lot of that on Rune's influence.
You can, but I guess then we have to kind of dig into the component parts of humanity, And the way it's described is that humanity is made both of ruin and preservation, with a very slight amount more in preservation's favor. And that's the entirety of what's giving them sentience. So, is it possible, if everything bad is ruin, I think it's hard to say that there are no bad humans and they're just influenced by ruin, because everybody's just influenced by ruin.
I understand the logic that you're going for.
Yeah,
I guess I'm not trying
right now.
I'm not trying to go that direction so much as I am. I think what this points to, in a very top level way, is that Brandon has a lot of faith in humanity, and by painting us a picture and a world that doesn't have any truly evil people in this story, and it's just a supernatural evil that we're kind of fighting, is very interesting. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I think that it does leave us in an interesting place as far as conversation goes, because motivations are all basically aimed at survival.
So the direction I was taking it was more to do, obviously I went down the path already, but additionally, if it's slightly in favor of preservation in every human, and if we're going good versus bad in that comparison, there's always going to be slightly more good than bad.
Yeah, this goes, and I think that this is maybe positing Sanderson's own idea of, or like at the very least, we can read it as a potential positing of the idea that people are more good than bad, or have more potential for good than bad naturally, is kind of the way that I read it from a top perspective, if that makes sense.
It does.
And in addition, we have an in-world rationale as to why people are more good than bad.
Yeah. Very explicitly.
literally made of more good than of bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that that's really fascinating when you look at the entire series, because that's kind of how the entire series is painted in a larger light, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So far, like
So far.
this is that's the argument of like the Lord Ruler isn't that bad. Is kind of like, well, he was doing what he had to. Made some decisions that were actively destructive, but was under Rune's influence, and that could have been fucking him up and making him make poor choices. So all kinds of things. Anyway, I just wanted to point that out because this is where I drew this conclusion, is when I read this logbook. I was like, oh, this kind of gives a lot of people an out. Seriously, the one exception is Straff Venture. In all seriousness, he is so bad, and it is not Ruin's fault. Ruin had nothing to do with Straff's fucked up behavior.
Do we know that for sure?
We know, well, we were in his perspective, and we never heard voices. So
That's true, but I mean, there's only 2 people we've heard voices with. Or 3 now.
4. Spook, Quellian, Zane,
yeah.
Vin.
Yeah. I don't know. I bet he had a secret piercing.
It's a supposition entirely, but I just want to it is even set of whom comes onto the scene like a bad guy ends up being a friend in the end. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, that was just it was a rogue piece of analysis that I kind of had that I realized reading this logbook.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that's super. I hadn't taken notice of that, but yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
It's just a thing I noticed this time. I was like, so no one's bad? Is that what you're telling me? Cool. Anyway, getting into the chapter itself. This chapter has a bunch of wonderful moments between Yeoman and Elend as they wait for their ends at the hands of the Koloss. Of course, they don't have time to philosophize, but I feel like Brandon, like we said last week, really nailed Yeoman as a character here. It comes through really, really clearly here and now, in terms of like how they even like bounced back and forth with the way that they're talking and citing different books secretly at each other. It's very clever, and it really makes that character of Yeoman shine through.
Yeah. I can't quite figure out why, and maybe you can lend some light to it, but this is one of the cleanest characters that I've ever experienced, period. Especially considering how quickly like we've come to know him.
You know? He reminds me of in a way where just came onto the scene and was fully formed and very believable. I think in part because of the natural command, and by natural command, I mean like command over the subject matter that they're known to be experts in. So because they're the subject matter expert, they just feel like they have all of this authority already when they show up on screen.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. That was my thought between the two. That was my immediate, that's where my brain went when you said, cleanest characters you've experienced. I was like, reminds me of Glorostes in that way, but
it does. That's a good call.
Yeah. I mean, I love their like little bromance that they have. I think it'd be a lot of fun to explore in, another series, another novel.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like they'd make a good pairing of characters. So
yeah, fan fiction.
Yeah, sure, fan fiction. I wasn't exactly meaning it that way, but fair enough. Jesus, they talk about the defining characteristics of an army and how it requires more good than strategy to win the day, but actual tangible hope. In addition to the kind of aforementioned things here, what did you think about their discussion of military strategy?
Actual tangible hope. I think that's something that does go often kind of represented and under thought during strategic planning, but morale, I guess would be the better way to put it, is incredibly important in almost every aspect, even outside of military sort of planning.
Hey, can we take a break? I'm so sorry. They're just like going off nonstop, and it's picking up all of them while it's actually not that big of a deal because I can just cut out the audio. Never mind. We're fine.
No, we can take a break.
We don't need to. I was bothered by the fucking fireworks. Sorry to interrupt. You're good. It was like a nonstop barrage, and I kept watching it peak up like half my audio, and I was like, that's a fucking annoying. The problem is I don't know if they're going to stop, so I don't know that taking a break is helpful anyway. Talking about military strategy, I'm so sorry. And the delineation between like hope and like the importance therein is what you were saying.
Yeah. So I think maybe you Would you disagree that like morale is essentially what he's talking about here?
That's what Elend's talking about with the
as far as like actual tangible hope.
I don't know. I mean, I think that all of what they're both saying feeds into morale, like the cleanliness and like that's a part of morale. I also think that hope is a part of morale. That's, I think, maybe what they're both trying to get to. And I think they're both pointing to those things being necessary for morale. But I think that actual tangible hope is when you're in the face of something that feels unbeatable. I think that's more kind of what he's going for here.
So like needing...
But he's applying it a little bit more generally, I think, than he probably should be.
Okay. Yeah. But needing something that's not fighting for futility's sake, you know?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it feels like, okay, if we go charge into the Colossus right now, what do we get out of it? Like we die in the earthquakes, like we die to the volcanoes going off, like it's a zero-sum game right now. And I think that's where my brain goes with what Elend's thinking. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's such a complicated thing, right? Too, like I don't know. I like that you tied it all back to morale, because I think that regardless, all of those things are direct influences on morale. Being able to food, cleanliness, being able to eat.
I would like to food, please.
Please food me now, and not the spam foods, though. Can it be a good food? Fish?
No.
Could I have a fish? One fish, please. The whole thing. Eyeballs first. Okay, anyway. I love Elend's reflection that he's a bastard here as well that happens inside of this. He, to quote, says, "I'm a bastard. In composition, not in temperament or by birth. I'm an amalgamation of what I've needed to be. Part scholar, part rebel, part nobleman, part Mistborn, and part soldier. Sometimes I don't even know myself. I had a devil of a time getting all those pieces to work together. And just when I'm starting to get it figured out, the world up and ends on me." I love this little build in this little section, this little quote from Elend, because I think it summarizes the issues that we had with Elend's character to begin this story with, where we're like, what the fuck, dude? Like, this doesn't mesh with what you were before. And this is him recognizing that he wasn't meshing, and that he, had to work that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they like to bring it up, but that pesky world ending is really kind of a buzzkill, huh?
It's pretty bad, yeah.
I do like this sort of actualization of his character in the descriptions there. But that quote that you just plucked and read, maybe it's because it's top of mind, and maybe I'm just wrong, but it feels like Darrow, and it feels like written by Pierce Brown, not Brandon Sanderson, to a certain degree.
In the way that it's all explained? Is that what you're thinking?
Just in the cadence, I guess, of that monologue.
Okay.
And the use of the word devil.
That's a fair point. Pierce does say devil a lot, in hindsight. I can't wait to go back and read Dark Age before the new book. Anyway, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I totally agree with you, though. I think that the world ending is a very big buzzkill, and it does feel like it's got a more... This is an outward monologue, but this would be an inner Darrow monologue in a big way. It does kind of feel similar. It evokes those feelings. We've been talking a little bit about that, and you know what? I'm sorry, folks. We try as hard as we can to keep these conversations as separate as possible. However, with all of the big news that came out with Red Rising over the last couple of days, I've been unable to fully separate my brain.
Yep, same.
Yep. So
I don't think that was any spoiler, though. So
no. We haven't spoiled anything. Like, no one knows who Glorastes is. They don't know when they come into the story. No one has any clue. And definitely the way descriptions are written is also not a spoiler. So I think we're in the clear.
Perfect.
This chapter is so fucking dense with stuff. This is another, I think it's 10 minutes in the audiobook, or something like that. Like, it's only a couple of pages, but there's still more to talk about here. Most of these other ones, we were like 2 questions and done to like hit the core points of everything that was said. But this is so much. Yeoman explains Allomantic theory in depth and the explanation between the number 16 and the importance that it holds inside of the religion, the number of original inquisitors, the number of Allomantic medals, the laws that governs the canton of resource, and like all of these different things that the Lord Ruler placed emphasis on this number 16. What did you make of the reveal of medals and their breakdown into categories? And I feel like this is something that we should definitely talk about and mention, because we also see that we learned a little bit that A-Team doesn't fit the categories. But what'd you think?
I felt validated.
Yeah.
I felt very validated by it. It makes so much sense given the model that we have and the way that everything's paired off and fits together. I'm curious if Elend had ever like thought through that before, because that seems like something that he would break down and think about, even if it wasn't explicitly written out. Vin knew that it was like sets of 4, and when she posited that there were 12, I don't know, it seems logical.
Yep. 4 sets of 4.
Yeah, it seems very clean and logical, especially when you get to the point where you're passing 12.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think in particular, the way that they mentioned the way that the different metals are, the physical metals, the mental metals, the temporal metals, and the enhancement metals, makes for a very interesting like quadrant breakdown as well in the way that they're influenced. And then in each of those, you've got your internal metals and your external metals. So that's how you like further quantify. You not only have your internal, external, you also have pushing and pulling metals. So like the whole thing is a perfect grid. We were talking about Punnett squares earlier. It's like a 4-sided Punnett square. Unfortunately, I can't show you the really cool one because you don't know the other metals yet. We have to hold off on that for a little bit.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. But it is very neat to look at and be like, yeah, fuck yeah, that's so cool. Because it does all work. But yeah. It's pretty neat. Pretty neat. You were pretty on it in terms of like the idea of like how these should break out and kind of the importance therein of the number. So
yeah.
Yeah. This chapter ends with a revelation. The mists weren't just making men sick, they were snapping them into allomancers. Preservation was attempting to turn men into an army of powerful magic users for Vin and Elend, or Elend, to fight back against ruin. I'm going to retake that last bit. Preservation was attempting to turn men into an army of powerful magic users for Elend to fight back against ruin.
Mm-hmm. Lots of thoughts with this one.
Mm-hmm.
I think first and foremost, why did some die? My assumption is that those are kind of like the Mistborn, and they're snapping a little bit too hard and don't have pewter to bolster their recovery. Like that's my initial thought. Like they're stronger, they're the Mistborn. They're going to be the Mistborn ones. Don't have any other like anything to back up that claim, but that's where I'm sitting at. Nobility had been marked as immune from the mist to begin with. And is that because there's already allomancy in their bloodline? So this would be like a separate snapping? Like they've already gone through sort of the selection process at birth. And if that's the case, are 16% of people, like 16% of nobles, also mistings or allomancers in general? Does it follow that same trait?
Well, I'm not going to answer the last one for sure, because that leads to some interesting things. But I think that the reason that the noblemen are immune is because as a society, everyone gets beat until the point that they may snap, right? And so you know who they are. There's no... The mists won't snap them because they've already been snapped or they are incapable of snapping.
Okay. So this is
the story of a girl who cried a river and drowned the whole world. I'm so sorry.
But I guess at that point, it would mean that these are the same, like the same pools of people that are being drawn upon. So preservation isn't coming in and saying like, hey, some of these guys are going to snap from like a separate pool of power. So,
right.
Yeah,
This is all because they're all out. It's it's all allomantic power, right? It's not, it's activating the preservation within them, and only so many have enough, or only so many, have the capabilities of even being activated to begin with.
This fucks with the idea that it's all genetic, though, huh? Like, could these people have snapped otherwise?
What do you think?
Yes.
Yes? Was that?
Yep.
They could have snapped otherwise? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's entirely what the story is pointing towards, is that they can snap regardless, and that while there is a genetic line that can be traced in terms of reproduction, we've already had it described that a little bit of preservation is in everyone, and this is just exposure to activate that ability. We know that allomancy is innately derived from preservation, so I think, if I remember correctly, the argument is that it is more prevalent in noblemen because of their direct lineage than it is in anyone else. And we haven't been exposed to Ska who have been broken and then would have the means or the resources to use it without any sort of noble heritage. Does that make sense?
It does. It also brings into mind Spook and that conversation that he had regarding his grandfather.
Yep.
And that I remember thinking that story felt odd and out of place. Like it was like they needed an explanation for who his noble lineage was.
Mm-hmm.
But that might be entirely untrue.
It could be. I don't think that that's meant to be, but to that point, I mean, why not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know.
It poses some interesting questions that are yet to be answered as well, like that have not been fully. We don't have a full conclusion here yet, but all of those things that I've said and reiterated are within play because of the textual stuff that we've had up until this point. So I don't feel like I've done any spoily boys.
No, totally. As far as dying goes, did you address that one?
No.
Okay. Will you address that one or not?
Nope.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, there's still more to learn. Like you said, up until the last fucking page. So don't count on it until we're out, and even then, maybe don't. Cool. All right, so that wraps up chapter 70. We've got chapter 71 and our logbook entry. There's something special about the number 16. For one thing, it was preservation's sign to mankind. Preservation knew, even before he imprisoned Ruin, that he wouldn't be able to communicate with mankind once he diminished himself. And so, he left clues that couldn't be altered by Ruin, clues that had related back to the fundamental laws of the universe. The number was meant to be proof that something unnatural was happening, and that there was help to be found. It may have taken us long to figure it out, but when we eventually did understand the clue, late though it was, it provided a much-needed boost. As for the other aspects of the number, well, even I am still investigating that. Suffice it to say that it has great ramifications regarding how the world and the universe itself works.
16 is a pretty sweet number.
Yeah?
Yep.
Why do you say that?
Well, it's the square of a square.
That's true.
I think the first instance of that, other than one itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. It's a cool number. Fuck off.
I mean, it is a cool number. Don't get me wrong. I'm just wondering if you have anything else to run on there.
I mean, all the things that our author talked about, it being the center of the universe. No, what it does tell me is that we could potentially expect to see something with the number 16 in other Cosmere books, because he says that it's not confined to this world. It's how this universe works, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how the universe was created.
Mm-hmm.
Hypothetically, that's outside of Ruin and Preservation, unless this just happens to be the final battlegrounds for these two forces. But it seemed to me like Ruin and Preservation were confined to Scadrial. But I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You can't just smile and like nod at me all the time.
I mean, I have to do a lot of that. That's a lot of the whole game of this show. So I'm sorry. But at the same time, I'm not that sorry.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that it does kind of point to kind of a larger question about the number 16. And I think that it's unlikely that we're going to get answers anytime soon. And on top of that, I'm actually like doubling the time until we make it to the Stormlight Archive. So it's going to be a while until maybe there are any answers there either.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be lost in limbo for a little bit.
Yep, a little bit. It'll be fun. Cool. All right. This chapter, we focus in on Sazed and the Kandra talking about the religion of the Terrace people. What do you make of the conversation with Haddock and the rest of the first generation about Vin and her position as the hero of ages in the religion of preservation and ruin?
Generally, I'm really happy for Sazed throughout this whole scene. Getting to finally talk about and learn the religion of his people, the one that he's been looking for, the one that he assumed was just completely lost for such a long time. Specifically, though, I find it kind of funny that they're having the same conversations that we've been having and others in the story have been having regarding, like, if she was actually the hero and if it was just Ruin kind of manipulating everybody, and the sort of, like we talked about before, the assumptions that it'd be a man despite the gender neutral wording of the prophecies. This is kind of the point where I think personally I started thinking more about that sort of idea that there's something more that we're missing regarding that part of the prophecy, but I don't really have anything super solid to latch onto for that.
Sure. Yeah. It's a difficult, I mean, it's not difficult to parse or anything like that, but it is like a consistent mystery. And it's not as though there's a whole lot to go on at this point, which is the same boat that Sazed's left in, right? And that's why it's so cool that he gets to, unlike all of these other religions that are dead, that he just interrogated and like broke down over the course of this book. This is the one that has real people that can really respond, as opposed to just the recorded information that the keepers kept. So that leads to a really interesting place here where he gets to actually have conversations about religion and about faith and about these things with someone that isn't himself. Like, he has been the sole master of religion, and throughout this entire series, he's been pitching religions to people. And so this brings it back and really like focuses in and is like, I think it's great for him in a ton of ways. I love this chapter and what it does for our boy.
Our boy. Yeah. He seems to be in a better spot.
Yeah.
More or less.
For sure. And I think that getting back to the hero of ages thing and the general neutral, you don't think that Vin is the hero of ages, right?
Correct. I think Sazed is.
So you think Sazed is. Why do you think Sazed is?
Because I think Sazed's the author, and the author explicitly said that, unfortunately, they're the hero of ages. So,
yeah. Do you think anyone with power would say that they're unfortunately the hero of ages?
No, but the cadence and the way that he writes very much screams Sazed to me.
Do you think that anyone who's given godly capability could potentially have a shift in voice as they become omniscient?
I guess maybe. Sure. They're allowed to. But I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds fine, I guess. Oh, man. Fair point. I can understand. I understand all of the things that you're pointing to. Just trying to give you, different approaches. Make sure that you're not, shocked when the hero of ages is unfortunately revealed to not be the one that you think it is. I have to tamper your expectations a little bit, Is this making you question who you believe the hero of ages is?
No, not at all.
I see I have done my job. Okay. This raises the question of what my job is in the first place.
Yeah, what is your job?
I don't fucking know. In this circumstance, I don't know. I hit the record button and then I talk, and people like listening to it from time to time. So I appreciate all you out there. Finger guns. So Sazed also brings up his personal issue with faith that he's discovered and tried to come to terms with since Tyndall's death, and works through it out loud for the first time with these forebearers of the Terrace people, right? Of these people of whom hold this religion. And I really love this exploration here. I think it's really fantastic and profound. I remembered that there was a little bit of an annotation that Brandon had written up about this specific section. It's one of the longer ones, but I pulled a little bit of an extract from it because I think that it's a good lens into it's a better way of approaching it than I would have written immediately. And I like how kind of succinct it is. So I wanted to cite it here so that we can talk about it. They talk about his search and how his search is something that can't be found, a religion that requires no faith in its believers. I find this fascinating. Religion, as it were, requires faith first so that you can enter its almost circular logic within itself, as the basic tenets require that you believe before proof is given or shown. Meanwhile, science teaches that you get proof and then come around to believing. So that's kind of, I paraphrased 4 paragraphs into that effectively. Sazed's been searching for an easy answer that hasn't required him to commit, and he's not quite there yet, it feels. He's not ready to commit to these things. And they kind of, I think this shakes him in a good way. Not like, it's not like grinding him down to his base or anything like that, but it's like, hey, dude, like grab him by the shirt and being like, come on, do you get it?
Yeah, I think
in a good way.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things about this is the fact that his approach is looking at these religions almost as if they're in a sales catalog. You know?
That's a good way of putting it.
He's shopping for one. And he's not diving into them on a personal level because he wants to find the perfect one before he commits that time and does that. So it's just perfectly ironic that that's exactly the piece that was missing from his perspective, and what makes religion function in this sort of way. Like, it's also kind of funny in a depressing way that this religious scholar is coming to the realization that his actual like scholarship in this is entirely not useful in trying to find truth. You know, like he's cataloging all these religions. He's making all these comments and like writing everything down, but that doesn't have anything to do with this actual pursuit.
Yeah, I love that first and foremost. I think that it's really important. I think the fact that you address the fact that it's like it's almost like the meme of the Venn diagrams that aren't overlapping. Of like the two sides, and it's just like you just need to push them together a little bit more, dude. Like, and that's what he was missing. I love that, especially when talking about his circular logic, because it is kind of like he's spinning in circles. And I love the comparison as though he's shopping through a catalog. Like, that is such a fantastic visual because it's what he's been doing. He's been looking for the perfect explanation, as opposed to understanding that you have to go in to find an explanation or to believe in the possibility of an explanation to begin with. And it's a fascinating little divergence here inside of the story, but it's Sazed's character, and I think it's really important. And I think it's great that you pointed out that it's unhelpful, because it has prevented him. It's been blinders on him, because he knows so much about so many things that he couldn't, because he knows that there's so much potential out there through all of these different things. He was unable to discern even that one could be correct, and because he just knows that there's so much possibility. It's fascinating.
It is.
I love Sazed. Sazed's probably my favorite character in the series. We're almost to the end.
It's fair.
But yeah, I love Sazed so much. But yeah. Any other thoughts?
I think genuinely what Branderson wrote that you kind of paraphrased, you know what? I think he understands what this author's talking about, and he was able to to get to the point of it pretty well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the reason that I like the annotation explanation here a little bit is because it really gives just a hint more, just like the tiniest little hint more on what he was thinking. And it also goes to say that he's like, I'm a man of faith. I also believe in science, obviously, and I think that there are a lot of things that are incongruous there, and I think that that's something that a religious person has to like face in order to get to these points. And I think that this is just a great way of saying, like, there's an incongruity between the two, but that's not necessarily perfect, especially in a fictional story where you can also make the incongruous a little bit more congruous. So yeah, I dug it. That's why, like I said, I've tried to avoid these as much as possible. I think I brought one in for like the last 3 episodes or something like that. But this one, the precise quotation is just very nice to work with on top of that.
Right.
I say precise quotation. I didn't quote. I fucking paraphrased. Anyway, at the top of the episode, I explained this and I was like, I feel like this is the closest I've ever been to plagiarizing, so I have to make sure that I cite this properly.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right.
I was going to have to call the cops on you.
Yeah, the plagiarism police in this podcast. So there's the conversation of the craft of humanity and how portions of each of the gods, ruin and preservation's bodies, were given over to make the people. But more preservation is he gave up a portion to give everyone the capability of becoming allomancers. This is kind of what I was talking earlier in the connection between the myths. Like, this is that puzzle piece kind of shoving together. We already knew that there was a piece of preservation in everyone because of how it's stolen with hemalurgy from the description of the Koloss and the way that that interaction works in general. This is just a more solid, like, rationale or reasoning as it's been presented. Part of a weird part of the story is because we are reading it through all of these different perspectives and everyone is being provided with different levels of information. Brandon also has to make sure that every character is given the information that's relevant to them, which means sometimes we hear it multiple times. So I don't even remember where we heard that the first time. Like,
yeah.
It could have been a logbook, maybe.
Maybe. I can't remember.
But regardless.
I have a lot of questions, though.
Okay.
What happens to the dead people? And where does their power go? Does it get, like, reabsorbed and recycled into the system? Or is it just gone and that's how Ruin has been, like, slowly getting comparatively more and more powerful? Additionally, I don't know why I'm thinking about this right now, but hemalurgy requires that the person be an allomancer, yes, to steal their allomantic powers. But
in order to steal the powers, yes.
But it doesn't necessarily care. Does it? Does it care? Yeah, it does. It cares what kind of allomancer you are,
yes,
or the victim is. But could that happen pre-snapping?
That's a good question.
Like, is that power inherent?
I don't think so, because you don't know how it manifests. So I don't know. I don't think so. That's my best answer.
Now I'm just imagining a world where, like, now that they know that everybody has the possibility of snapping, we get another Lord Ruler situation, but an actually evil one this time, who basically just takes all of the Ska children, or like a certain percentage of them, and just knows, like, I'm dealing with like a 16 in 100 chance that I'm going to get a hemalurgic spike out of this and just murder children.
Yeah, the science gets particular, like the numbers get particularly brutal in the way that you could actually use those in dangerous ways. Now that you mention it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of scary. You'd have someone truly use the system that way. When comparing the body sizes of the two gods, we stumble into a dire revelation, a thing of the first contract, as it's even said to us inside of this little section. Ruin is coming for his body, and it is here in the homeland, in the trust, a pile of atium as they rip open this hole in the ground that they'd been storing this. Thousands upon thousands of nuggets in the ground. Fun fact, in the book, it's actually beads, which means it was corrected from nuggets from the audiobook. Interesting. And they proceed to explain how the Lord Ruler hid the sheer amount of atium that had been collected from the eyes of Ruin and society at large. As we know, metal in general is hidden from Ruin. Like, he can't see into metal. He can't see metal. It's blinding. But this is interesting.
This is interesting. Now we know what Ruin's body is, and he's essentially Metal Mario. He's just walking around.
A Metal Mario? Like,
yeah, you've seen Metal Mario, right?
Yes, I have. Because
I think we've explicitly talked about him.
It's true.
Or maybe that was Metal Bowser. I can't remember.
I think it was Metal Bowser, but I mean, the rationale stands. The reason we were talking about it was because of Metal in Mario Bros.
So, yeah, I'm just... How big is this pile? I think it's still probably
thousands
not
and
that
thousands.
Big. Thousands and thousands of little nuggies is still maybe smaller than you and I.
I think it's bigger than that. I think the assumption is that it's a lot.
Okay.
But
I believe you. But I don't want to believe you. I want Ruin to just be this tiny little metal dude that has short man syndrome.
Played by Chris Pratt in the movie, you know, it's all the same.
Exactly.
Can you imagine if Ruin was played by Chris Pratt? That'd be like, I can't actually. I physically cannot.
I mean, would it still be his like unaugmented voice inside of Vin's head all the time?
Yes, for sure.
I wish I could do a Chris Pratt impression.
You know, at this point, me too. And I'm just imagining his character from Parks and Rec being Ruin.
Yeah.
Not as though Chris Pratt is trying to make Ruin serious, but as though what's his name stumbles into the power. Oh my God. Andy Dwyer. Just imagining Andy Dwyer. So fucked up. And now I'm imagining preservation is Rob Lowe, and that's where we're at. Little shadow of Rob Lowe jumping up and down, waving his hands, yes or no for things.
doing jumping jacks.
Yeah.
Yep.
Short, dark-haired man, big prominent nose. I mean, he doesn't have the prominent nose, but we could fix that.
We have prosthetics.
Yeah, it's fair. Anyway, I'm so sorry for the derail. Yeah, Mario, Pratt. Yep, for sure. Definitely. Definitely the case.
Oh, wait, he played Mario too, didn't he?
He is playing Mario. It's not out yet.
It's going to be so fucking dumb.
It's going to be so fucking dumb. I'm very excited for how dumb it is going to be. I think in the same year, he's voicing Garfield and Mario, which is like... Okay. Anyway, we've got so much more to go yet. Actually, not that much. Most of these chapters go pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, but seriously... Were you at all shocked by the ATM reveal that it was here?
Yeah. I was surprised by it. It wasn't like a shattering discovery because it makes a ton of sense. So it wasn't like a fuck, oh shit, mind blown kind of deal. But it was surprising. And I genuinely thought it was inside of the Inquisitor spikes.
Mm-hmm.
I really thought I was right on that one.
I'm for sure making you drink for that. That's why I was like, I need you to fully explain your thought process here. I need all of it.
It would have made sense, right?
It could have, yes. If I didn't understand a little bit more about hemalurgy, it totally could have made sense.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was surprising. But in hindsight, and in retrospect, we get some more reveals about the actual like ATM trade that we hadn't actually realized. Like, we knew that the Ventures dealt in like transporting the geodes, but the fact that they've been like opened and siphoned off and like reclosed like a, I don't know, teenager raiding a liquor cabinet was clever, really clever. Unlike a teenager raiding a liquor cabinet.
That the obligators had been doing it the whole time. Yeah. Yep. I really like this explanation, man. I think that it's especially powerful because of its proximity. It's like they didn't even take it away from the pits. They just moved it around the hill basically and put it on the other side. Like, that to me is ingenious on the part of the Lord Ruler, right? To be like, I'm going to hide it so close you're never even going to know. Like, it's right next door.
Yeah. And it allows for it would allow for a reasonable explanation for any sort of security going to and from there.
Mm-hmm.
Not protecting the stash, but protecting the like production. But there wasn't really much in the way of security in general, right? Kind of oddly,
right?
So, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think there's more strength in the way that the Kandra also work for the ATM then as well. Like, the reason that they work for ATM only is because they're trying to remove it from the pool to put it in the pile with all the other ATM. So it's just this like perfect economic system. And the reason, like, Kandra do not like humans, and that is very clearly evidenced by all of the interactions that have been had for the most part. between, Orsor, Renew, etc. They don't really like contracts and owners and things like that. And you even posited like, well, why the fuck are they doing this? And I was like, well, because they get paid in ATM. And you're like, yeah, but why the fuck do they want the ATM? And this is why they're literally, they've been delegated by the Lord Ruler to prevent ruin from coming back. Basically, they're the most important of the three creations.
Yeah, it's all coming together, folks.
Mm-hmm. The end is in sight.
But there's still rules that I don't have, and I would like you to give me the rules.
I cannot give rules. Raffo?
Give rules.
Raffo.
Yeah. You know I'm fucking reading the rest of the book once we get done, right?
I figure, yeah. There's only like 60 pages left, so it's not like there's a whole lot. But regardless, I do want to at the very least mention that ATM isn't on the normal allomantic table in Mal ATM. That's confirmed, basically, that something is wrong and off and that they do not belong where they belong. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but, outside of Gib rules, did you have any reaction to this?
Well, it makes me wonder what the fuck is Mal ATM then? Like, is that another god's body? I mean, it's an alloy, so it's mostly made of ATM, so no is the probable answer. But that's a good question. If they can like turn it all into malatium instead, would Ruin be able to use it as his body?
If they turned it all into malatium?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. You know what? Here's the thing, PJ. As a part of being a VIP to the Brandon Sanderson convention, of which I know you're not, I think I get a Q&A. I'm a part of a small Q&A. I don't know that question's been asked. I will double check the words of Brandon before I waste a bunch of time, but I think that's a genuinely great question.
It's an obvious solution to all their problems, right?
Right. Good one. Nice. It's interesting at the very least. Like and I think, yeah, I'm gonna leave that there. But I think it's a very interesting question, and I'm not sure on the answer.
Cool.
So, cool. Chapter ends cutting back to Tensoon, looking over the plains and seeing that Tyrion, one of the many ash mounts, has exploded, losing its top and destroying everything in a flow of lava. The world truly is ending.
No, stop. Don't, please. Please, world.
You're too cute.
You're too cute.
Pretty. No, world, you're so hot. Don't explode.
I mean, we get the name of one of the mountains. Is it still named that if it's gone?
For the record, Tyrion's been named in every book, but...
Has it?
Yeah, because it's the largest ash mountain. It's in the side of Luthadel. They say that they can see it from over top the city walls and other things like that. So it's been named, but it's not a focal point. Now it's exploded.
Yeah, now it doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Now it's not the biggest mountain.
Right. Or Tyrion, not Tyrion. I think it's Tyrion or something like that. I probably typed Tyrion because, Lannister. Yeah. With that, we go into chapter 72 and the longest logbook, the single longest logbook. So I apologize. It is literally 6 paragraphs. Yes, there are 16 medals. I find it highly unlikely that the Lord Ruler did not know of them all. Indeed, the fact that he spoke of several on these plates in the storage caches meant that he knew at least of those. I must assume that he did not tell mankind of them earlier for a reason. Perhaps he held them back to give him a secret edge, much as he kept back the single nugget of preservation's body that made men into Mistborn. Or perhaps he simply decided that mankind had enough power in the 10 metals they already understood. Some things we shall never know. Part of me still finds that what he did regrettable. During the 1,000-year reign of the Lord Ruler, how many people were born, snapped, lived, and died, never knowing that they were mistings, simply because their metals were unknown. Of course, this did give us a slight advantage at the end. Ruin had a lot of trouble giving duralumin to his inquisitors, since they need an allomancer who could burn it to kill before they could use it. And since none of the duralumin mistings in the world knew about their power, they didn't burn it and reveal themselves to Ruin. That left most inquisitors without the power of duralumin, save in a few important cases, such as Marsh, where they got it from a Mistborn. This was usually considered a waste, for if one killed a Mistborn with hemalurgy, one could draw out only one of their 16 powers and the rest would be lost. Ruin considered it much better to try to subvert them and gain access to all of their power.
So that would mean that the other few, like other than Marsh, that he alludes to would be Mistborn already that got converted into Inquisitors, yes?
I would assume, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because Marsh was given it by killing a Mistborn as opposed to, everyone else. Seekers make great, Inquisitors, as mentioned before, because they have that enhanced power of bronze then kind of innately.
Seeker and
getting a Mistborn is better.
Fucks me up.
That's fair.
Bit.
Yeah.
Just side note.
Yeah, that's fair.
Then, so I guess one thing to break down that we haven't really talked about, but was addressed earlier, but is relevant here now. Marsh has 20 spikes.
Mm-hmm.
There are 16 metals.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably, spikes wouldn't stack, right? Oh, but there's also ferrochrome.
Yes. I don't remember about the eyes. I feel like the eyes
are the same. Like there are some
doubles.
The
same. Yeah, I think that's maybe the one double, but I don't remember, and I'm not 100% certain. So,
yeah,
I think outside of that, that sounds about right.
Ferrochrome is a separate set of powers.
Yeah. I would assume it'd be one spike per power. It could even make sense that it's pushing and pulling is one spike in each eye, because they do still see those elementic lines, and both pushing and pulling create the blue lines. So it would be a shock to me if it weren't one for each of those.
Right. Okay.
But I believe they are both iron spikes.
Cool.
So
we know those don't line up 1-to-1 with the allomantic metals as well, necessarily. Through spooks, he had the iron, or the steel sword gave him the ability to burn pewter.
There are rules. Yeah. Yeah. We're starting to draw in closer on them. Closer, my friend. Yeah, cool. So we open this chapter with Vin arriving in Luthadel, and it has begun to rain. She feels the pulse of the Inquisitors chasing her from behind and knows that she only has so much time left. The city to her feels empty, but still grand in all the ways that it had at the beginning of the story. I think that it's really cool that Brandon chooses to come back to Luthadel here, because this is where the climax of every story has happened, as in Creedic Shaw. And so being back here feels like a homecoming, and it feels like it's the signal. Yeah, right. Every time. But it is still the place where things go down.
Yeah. So I think this scene, or maybe like this chapter, is what's depicted in the audiobook cover art.
Yes. This is the cover art. Yep.
That makes me realize there's cover art here, which includes a railroad spike, and we haven't seen any railroad spikes. There are several of them. So that's an interesting thought. But yeah, I do like that there's kind of a return to this incredibly powerful place, not only strictly from a historical standpoint at this point. But,
Yeah. I think it's great to return. It's necessary, ultimately. I totally agree. So, as she's here, she has a conversation with Ruin, of whom has almost come to the conclusion that this is a wild goose chase, but he can't rule it out entirely, and that frustrates him to no end. Vin tells him he will never have it, and Ruin fumes with rage. Lightning illuminates the mist, and the Inquisitors are working their way around her as the storm continues to rage in the backdrop. And this just feels so cinematic.
Oh, it
as
does.
you it's like the lightning, or the lightning and thunder crash, and you get the illumination of the 12 men in robes surrounding her, and it all just feels like a movie.
Are we supposed to get from this that Ruin is connected to the storm somehow through his temperament, or is it just kind of good scene setting?
I would that's interesting. I feel like it's closer to a connection to the storm itself, because we know that Rune can impact the world and like cause earthquakes and other things like that. The volcano. So why not weather? Like, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
I feel
wasn't
like that's
sure if that was like something explicit one way or the other.
I think in an interesting way, you could point to it being, again, kind of similar to Allomancy, where like it was raining, but then when Rune got pissed, it exploded and it became, more than rain. I think that makes sense.
Fair. Yeah. I'm cool with that.
Yeah. So then the fight begins in earnest. Vin is doing her best to fight against them, teeth bared, daggers out, as she falls through the rain, slapped around by the various Inquisitors. Her mistcloak billows around her, and she even has like a superhero landing where she gets slapped into the ground but lands on her feet while continuing to fight. And this is just such a great scene. The combat here is incredible. I think it's so well written.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Talk about cinematic, man. Like, this is something I absolutely cannot wait for some sort of adaptation. Also, I believe I was wrong. I think this is where the 20 spike thing came in.
This is, I think, when it's specifically mentioned, but I mean, effectively, it's the same thing. It's the same chapter. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Vin obviously is fighting, 13 Inquisitors at the same time, bouncing between the different spires of Creedic Shaw in a very cool way before she is finally, after she manages to impale one and kill one, but then she is finally subdued and Marsh begins to snap her bones one by one.
Fuck. Oh, dude. What the absolute
When he gets to the fingers, when he's breaking the fingers one by one.
I would like that to stop happening, please.
Uh-huh.
That's all good. We're good on bone breaking. Marsh, you don't have to do any more of that. She gets it.
She's learned her lesson. we don't need any more of that. One was enough.
Very good from here on out.
I mean, the broken leg too, like that being the first one to just like take out and smash, and it's just
Ugh.
God. And so from there, I mean, I'm in shock, but we see Vin defeated and being gradually broken piece by piece by Ruin, and we move to Marsh, and man, is this just so hard to read. His every will doesn't want to do this. He's reflecting on all kinds of things, his different failures in his life. The line that we were just talking about where he breaks his fingers, in the middle of a thought, he's like, Kelsier treated her like a daughter, he thought, as he broke her fingers, and like then draws this comparison to Mare and is like, well, with that in mind, it would have been like a daughter that he would have had with Mare, breaks another finger. And it's just like this whole like line of he's like, this is not something, that he wants to do, but he can't stop himself because Ruin's in control.
I think it speaks to sort of the separation between him, like his body and his mind at this point.
Well, and
it's not finally
taken back. Well, he'd finally taken back control of his mind a little bit for the first time, right? This is that moment when he finally comes out. But it does draw that stark separation still. Like he was really just trapped in like a little corner of the back of his mind. Because if you think about the rest of the book up until this point, he's gotten perverse joy out of inflicting pain on people, like total sadism. And here is when he flips that. It's like he doesn't want to break her fingers. He's not resisting, but he doesn't derive joy. It's disgusting to him and it hurts. Yeah.
It's tough.
And then
it's tough to read.
It's very tough to read. I think it's well portrayed. I think it's important because it does actually give, Vin is defeated in all earnest. Vin, the Mistborn, is broken here and couldn't take what was happening. But there's a quote here that follows, which is the moment that Marsh breaks free. And to read it here, Vin had spoken of her insane mother. Reen said that he came home one day and found my mother covered in blood. She'd killed my baby sister. Me, however, she hadn't touched, except to give me an earring. He recalls this with the letter that he killed Goradel for and rips out Vin's earring with his last vestige of remaining will that he's been saving up all book to use. As opposed to kill himself, he frees Vin from Ruin.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he could have done this a few bones ago, though. Like,
I think it's really smart for him to. I mean, like, so I think the line is like he's going up to the collarbone very clearly to break those next, and that's when he takes control. Is when the hand's already close. So,
good job, Marsh boy.
Yeah.
Good boy, Marsh.
Good work. Man, is it brutal too. I mean, just the way that Marsh has been talking down to himself, you know, we were talking about like hating himself and like being self-contained earlier and that being a really big tell moment and whatnot. But this is just where you can really feel that push, and it feels like he finally kind of gets to be a hero for a moment. You know, it's that brief flash where Marsh is Marsh again for the first time in books.
Yeah.
So Vin snaps awake the moment that earring is removed from her ear. Ruin suddenly disappears, and just like that, the voice in her head spoke no further. The mists snap to her, kind of flowing around her again, now being able to do so without the hemorrhagic spike in her ear, as she lays there dying. And a voice whispers in her head, from the Well of Ascension, of course. It's the same power, after all. Solid in the metal that you fed to Elend, liquid in the pool you burned, and vapor in the air confined to the night, hiding you, protecting you, and giving you power. And I love how this is like not overly emphasized in the text, but it is. Michael Kramer shouts that final line, and it gets me with shivers every time. The end, giving you power. And this echoes back to that very first training that Vin and Kelsier had together when he said that the mists gave her power. And it wasn't quite clear how literally that was in this circumstance. Vin sucks in the mists, lending her body strength, her entire body burning like metal. She's burned in her stomach, pain disappearing entirely. Marsh swings for her head, and she catches his hand to end the chapter. That was a lot. Thoughts?
Yeah, thoughts. Does she not have her earring on in the other two times?
Correct.
Okay, I don't remember that being a part of the fight with the Lord Ruler.
The Lord Ruler yanks out the earring. With a pull, which seems wrong. Why could he do that? How could that be a thing?
Mm-hmm.
And then she pulls it out to get into the well, right?
Yep. Okay. And then she pulls it out when she doesn't have it on when she's imprisoned, right? Is that the other time?
No, Marsh. So it's the scene with Marsh, right?
Okay.
And she uses it to kill Marsh, in theory, pushing it through his head.
Right.
So she's using it as a weapon, and then it's removed, and then she can draw upon the mists.
Right. Okay. I will say the Farrakhamist part still holds true at this point.
God damn it.
Yeah. What a way, like, that would have been, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, that could have been a good stopping point for this.
It could have. Yeah, but it very well could have, but I would have felt a little cheated for the other characters because we aren't quite there yet. And that's then fair. It would have been, there's a lot of stuff that happens over the course of this entire part, which is like, 3 episodes at this point. But, when can we end? When do we have to keep going? So I really thought that it made the most sense to continue through here, to not have a very chunky last week, because it would have been like 100 pages and we wouldn't have done it justice.
No, that's totally fair.
Yeah, that was my thought. Yeah, it's a crazy set of chapters, and I love that quote. The whole talking about the power of preservation and its manifestation here in a big way. And that voice in her head.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
What crazy shit.
Yep. Cool. So with that, we go to chapter 73. We have our logbook to start this off. I've spoken of Inquisitors and their ability to pierce copper clouds. As I said, this power is easily understood when one realizes that many Inquisitors were Seekers before the transformation, and that meant their bronze became twice as strong. There is at least one other case of a person who could pierce copper clouds. In her case, however, the situation was slightly different. She was a Mistborn from birth, and her sister was the Seeker. The death of that sister and subsequent inheritance of the power via hemorrhagic spike used to kill that sister left her twice as good at burning bronze as a typical Mistborn. and that let her see the copper clouds of lesser allomancers.
Okay, so that right there may have just answered my question from before.
The feruchemy answer? Yeah, it's not.
No, not the feruchemy. The hemalurgic spike into an unsnapped person. She was a Mistborn from birth, which means it's predetermined that she will be a Mistborn. But hypothetically, she's not snapped at birth. Same for her infant sister.
Yeah, okay.
In all likelihood, probably isn't snapped yet.
So you just spike everyone in the hopes that you get a power. But you'd have to use the right type of spike. That's the problem, because there are different spikes for different powers. So you would have to have some other preternatural ability to determine,
or a lot more people.
I mean, you're basically suggesting Russian roulette to figure out.
Yeah.
And if you get it wrong, anyway. Would you make of the whole thing though, with the death of her sister being the one, the earring from the mom and the whole thing?
I hate how much of that information was just right there. You know, it was all right fucking there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
And then he spells it out for you and you're like, oh.
Yep. Totally makes sense. I had assumed that spike was already like a hemalurgic spike before. And I had even wrestled with the idea of like it leaches power, like it leaches power so quickly. So it must have been like used and then embedded in somebody and then like removed and then used on Vin. Like I hadn't even tied together the death of her sister because I had forgotten that was like at the same time. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Right fucking there.
It is. It was right there. Cool. It's sweet. I really love this. I love all the reveals that happen here at the end that really paint this story and as complete as it was at the beginning, because we really did have so much of the information in front of us the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Which is fantastic as far as for like storytelling goes. It's like, no, I just didn't put the puzzle together.
Right.
It was there. Cool. All right. So the beginning of this chapter is a wonderful montage hopping between perspectives as we see the dramatic changes in the mists as they all seem to flow from Tensoon, from Breeze's perspective, from Ham and Elend, from Spook, all seem to be flowing back towards Luthadel or in the direction of Luthadel. And all of them variously are called to action in their own ways. Breeze and Alrianne and Spook are immediately putting the people into the shelter as quickly as they can, trying to retreat into the storage cavern. Ham and Elend see that the Colossus have begun to retreat from their pressing attack on the city, meaning they're going somewhere else because they've maybe had a realization of where... they've maybe had a realization. Their withdrawal is clearly a piece of information. They also notice that the mists, of course, are flowing back towards Luthadel. They have to make all these judgment calls all of a sudden as things are changing as day breaks. I love that it's also as day breaks because I believe it was Marsh that says this is the last night before, kind of the whole other scene happens as it was.
Yeah. So the mists rushing towards Luthadel make me really kind of question more and more what they actually are. Like, what are these mists? They're concentrated, I don't know, attuned. Is it Preservation's body entirely?
We've gotten this answer. Yeah, this was provided by the Khandra. They said that it was the body.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Or a portion of the body, just like the well is a portion of the power.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. But I want to know why Spook was so quick to his proclamation that everybody had to be rushed to the storage centers. Did we get any sort of explanation for that?
Nope.
Kelsier came back, man.
Kelsier came back? How could Kelsier have come back?
He came back, started talking to Spook again.
Yeah, you think so?
Spook had to check himself for metal. I'm nope. All right, this is actually Kelsier this time. Let's fucking do it.
Let's fucking go. Oh, you're holding to that.
No, I think
I was like, Jesus.
Much in the same way Vin was able to have that presumably preservation contact where Michael Kramer screams. I'm guessing Spook had a similar sort of thing. Contact.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think so. You know, like it feels like it's the most reasonable thing to say that that's probably where he got the information from, or he just came to realize it. I don't think it's that egregious to say that it's like, this appears to be the end of the world, hide in the cave. What else are we gonna do?
That tracks.
You know,
good point.
Yeah. But to that point, I mean, we obviously had spooked before. Hearing the voice of Kelsier, it felt like the preservation voice potentially. You know, so yeah. So we move on from the kind of montage of all these different perspectives, and we come back to Vin flying around, fueled by the mists, her broken bones no longer bothering her, and she's fighting the 12 remaining Inquisitors, absolutely making mincemeat out of them. Removing 2 eye spikes is enough to do enough damage to kill them. And man, this scene is just like a flurry of emotion and power for me in a way that like seriously moved me. I think every time, like, I don't know what it is about like underdog success or like coming up from underneath such like egregious circumstances that makes me go, fuck yes, and like really moves me emotionally. This scene has gotten me every time I've read it. I loved it. I teared up a little bit. It's just, I get the little goosebumpies and I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah, this is good writing. Loved it.
So her broken bones aren't bothering her anymore, but is that to say that they're still broken?
I don't think so. I believe that they're physically, because she's using them fully.
Right. I was going to say she'd be all floopy, and maybe that would help her movement if she's not confined to like just
floopy. What the fuck? What the fuck for a couple of reasons. Like, all right. You and your floopy shit.
I don't know. If she's not as rigid anymore.
True.
Maybe she can move around better. So she's being fueled by the mists.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably, that means she's not burning metals that she's ingested, yes?
Correct.
Does that mean she technically has access to all of the metals?
In theory, yes. That would mean that she has access to all of the metals.
And
but I was just going to say, like, but does she know how to burn them? You know, like, does she know how to use them?
I mean, you can just try shit.
Vin, just try shit. Vin, just fucking do it.
Vin, let's fucking
now.
do it.
Burn aluminum.
Oh. Also, does that mean she has access to atium?
Great question.
I want to know. Do you think? Things. No.
What do you think? You think she doesn't have access to ATM?
Correct.
Okay.
I don't have a reason. Other than, like, it seems too different.
Yeah. I mean, we know that it kind of breaks rules, so.
Yep. No rule breakers allowed in the mists.
No rule breakers. Okay, cool. And man, I mean, like, the way that she's flying around here, she flies up above the clouds, flying among the stars, falling with a brilliant little bit of, like, the mist trailing her as she falls through the clouds. I love this. I love the description of it being a tether and the whole thing kind of like she's being pulled back down to earth after launching up over it's so great. This is such a beautifully translated scene that I really appreciate the whole thing of. I think it's brilliant.
It is. Everything about this chapter is brilliant. Like, I fucking love it.
It's really good. It's really good, man. All the mist continues to flow in, charging her with power, and she just explodes over the city that we've spent so much time in, destroying the Lord Ruler's palace and just destroying these monstrous men. It's just incredible as she dispatches them and like counts them off as she's going. And I just love that like little bit of extra, like, I'm getting them all and I'm getting them all and I get all the deaths and I'm tallying them up in my head, and 1, 2, 3 all of a sudden fall on the ground at the same time. And it's so good.
Yeah. Just absolutely chaotic, destructive power. It's so good. But I will say there's one place in this world immune to such nonsense. And that is the pooping room. And I'm sure that's still untouched.
The little pooping room, just holding out.
Yep.
I bet you're right. Just the little dome within a dome.
Mm-hmm.
The house within the dome. Yeah, I love it. I adore her. It's just so cool. So after dispatching all of these Inquisitors, Marsh is the last one left. And he's lying there having been, hurt and disabled and out of power. And Vin is just being consumed by this power almost. Like she's just charged with it as all of the mists have flowed in her direction. And it's this vast, incredible power. And then we cut away from Vin's perspective and cut to Marsh's perspective. And he's under this assumption. He's like, I've won. Like, this is okay. I can die. It's all going to end. He made a difference in the world for the girl that he loved, even though she's long dead, and Mare and his brother as well through the rebellion at large. And he's done. He's accomplished everything he needs to. Vin manages to pull out one of his 2 spikes. There's intense pain that he's feeling, but he's ready for the end. And before she gets to the second one, she hesitates and then vanishes, leaving a little shadow where she used to be.
I have a couple theories.
Okay.
One is this was another of the metals that she decided to burn.
Okay.
The other is a cosmic transportation of sorts. Like she is being transported somewhere. That gets into other stuff that I don't know if we want to address. But we have addressed.
Are you talking Elantris?
Yeah.
Okay. If you haven't read Elantris, skip forward 30 seconds. If you have, which you should. If you haven't, go listen to our short pour. Read the book, listen to our short pour, come back. What's your little pretty key boy?
Well, if the liquid in the well is the same essentially as what's in the mists, and she's being consumed, like she is taking in so much of this mist right now, maybe it's enough to like effectively be a similar pool that could transport you somewhere.
Do you have any assumptions on where the transportation is? Curiosity.
Either to a different planet or to the Well of Ascension.
Okay. Cool. I just wanted to clarify that because I think that's important. Cosmic transportation is so vague.
I was trying to be vague. I was trying intentionally to be vague for
right. And I'm turning this into a prediction, and I'm trying to make sure you're specific.
Yeah, that's fair.
Fair point. I mean, and it leaves with a really interesting question of like, did she have control over it? I like that you suppose that she might be burning the metal as well, or like a different metal, and that moved her potentially.
Yeah.
Or made her vanish.
Made her invisible. Like, we don't know that she's gone. There is the...
Right.
I don't know if that was like this thing disappeared from where it was displacing mist, so now there's like a little outline that's slowly fading. Or if it's like an actual sort of shadowy...
representation?
Yeah.
Yeah. I get that. I totally get it. I think it's great. Good. Cool. With that, we go to chapter 74. This one's short, but we've got a logbook. Of course... that is not short. It's not that short. It's kind of short. She once asked Ruin why he had chosen her. The primary answer is simple. It had little to do with her personality, attitudes, or even skill with allomancy. She was simply the only child Ruin could find who was in a position to gain the right hemalurgic spike, one that would grant her heightened powers with bronze, which would then let her sense the location of the Well of Ascension. She had an insane mother, a sister who was a seeker, and was herself Mistborn. That was precisely the combination that Ruin needed. There were other reasons, of course, but even Ruin didn't know them. There's
one other thing that's needed. Like, there's that combination that Ruin needs, but it's also a time frame thing. Like, he needs them to be ready and influenced by him enough by the time the power shows back up, and like almost exactly at that moment. So I get that maybe you could find that combination on a long enough timeline, but finding that combination exactly when you need it is an entirely different thing, you know?
Right. So there is something else there.
Yeah. It's either incredible luck, which is possible, or, I don't know, sort of time-bending abilities of some sort.
Okay.
Like not being able to affect sort of genetic lineage or anything like that, but being able to kind of shift when they occur. Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
We know from a base standpoint, that Brandon does not allow time travel inside of the story. Just as that's like the core rule of the Cosmere, just so you're aware. Okay. Time travel will never be introduced. That is never an answer because it complicates things far too much. You're not suggesting time travel. I'm just giving you that information because you're saying that like
I was thinking
some
more
other
like
timing.
He found that combination, or even like could tell that there was genetic predisposition somehow for that combination and just delayed them.
Mm-hmm.
So they're born later than they maybe would have.
Sure, to line it up more closely. But
that
makes sense.
It doesn't make a lot of sense, but it does make some sense.
It's a reasonable, like it's an assumption. It is an assumption. And it does feel like one that we have enough credence to at this point that, take it reasonably seriously. So,
right.
All right. Day breaks inside of this chapter with no mists. And I think that this is fascinating as the world is just kind of a world once again. The red sun overhead. It's a very different place without the mists there as the world begins to heat up despite the ash clouds and everything else. Like everything is still going very wrong. And there's just so many changes in circumstances here. Elend and Yeoman share a chat on the roof, and the people move themselves to safety like they have everywhere else. What'd you think about the world post mists?
I'm confused by the heating up as well. And I know like that's explicitly stated, like this shouldn't be happening like this, but yeah, I don't know what to make of it.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. You're not necessarily supposed to have the answers yet, but it's an interesting question to have kind of piled on here. Yeoman says something interesting here about religions and the place of non-believers in the plan. Now that we've sort of come to the end of the Lord Ruler's plan, I think it's safe to say that this religion he founded was one that was intended to have an expiration date. It had a mission, and that mission, while not yet fully fulfilled, as we've seen in the story, is beginning to move to a close. Yeoman chooses to give Elend his last bead of atium on his forehead as sort of a way of signing off and saying that this will be more useful for you. What did you think about the sort of conversation that the two of them shared regarding, the religion and the plan and everything else? I mean, obviously, Yeoman doesn't point to this being the end. This is me pointing to, the Lord Ruler's religion really just being a checklist of events that he knew was going to happen.
But I think this bead does kind of there's a few different things that I think this bead represents, this giving of the bead. Mm-hmm. One of them, I think, is recognizing that this is the end. Mm-hmm. And this is way more important than anything else that they're dealing with. It's also recognizing that they're no longer direct adversaries in a very tangible way.
Mm-hmm. Great point.
I'm sure there's a bunch more sentimental things I could come up with, but I think those are the two key points of the sort of truce and allyship, and then recognizing that this is the end and everything, including the religion that I've been holding on to for so long and so fervently, needs to, and to a certain extent, he's not even giving that up, but he's saying you're not a devoted member of this religion, but you're still a part of this plan, and I need to help you with this. So,
right. Which I think is a really fascinating thing, right? That is kind of a, it's got to be within the religion to try to help people along the point. That can get dicey, of course, when it starts to create conflicts of interest, and that's religious conversions and stuff like that. That becomes an issue. But at the very least, saying that this is me helping you enact the plan in a tangible way that I can help you do it, I think is great. Yeah. In this moment, Yeoman also explains something to us that we had presumed, but had never been confirmed until this moment. But he explains that he's a seer, which is an atium misting. What'd you make about this? Basically, it's exactly what you had worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do like the term seer. I just think seer and seeker are too close in both word and meaning as far as English language goes. Mm-hmm. That it gets a little confusing on my end just from trying to keep it all straight. But I think in this section, he also mentions that there is hidden information that the Lord Ruler was keeping, and it kind of implied that there was other secrets as well, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
including all the
intrigue.
medals, right? Like we get that from our hero as well.
Yeah. But just more intrigue. Yeoman better not fucking die at this point. I need those answers.
Do love a little yeoman. Yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see where it goes. All right. We go into our last chapter of the week. Again, it's a short one, relatively. So we had a couple of long Vin chapters that took a lot of time. This is our longest episode in a while. But going to chapter 75 here, we have our logbook. Each hemalurgic spike driven through a person's body gave Ruin some small ability to influence them. This was mitigated, however, by the mental fortitude of the one being controlled. In most cases, depending on the size of the spike and the length of time it had been worn, a single spike gave Ruin only minimal powers over a person. He could appear to them and could warp their thoughts slightly, making them overlook certain oddities. For instance, their compulsion for keeping and wearing a simple earring.
But that compulsion is only strong. You would think it's only existent when she's already wearing it, right? So if she takes it off, is it just kind of habit that drives her to wear the earring?
I think it's that Ruin influence, right? It's not, I mean, he's influencing the habit, yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right.
I think that's one of the real interesting things is to say, like, how much of habit forming could a creature like Ruin really influence in someone, right? Like, how much could they shape a person so they would make certain decisions in the long run, I think is an interesting thing to consider. Like something like an earring that had become like a consistent thing to do all of the time. Right. And there's some sentimentality that Vin has for it, you know, from her mother and everything else. But that's like backwards sentimentality, which is why it's, you know, from the beginning of the story, it's kind of an intentional oddity. And Yep. Some questions there. It's fun. Yeah. From like literally, I think it's like page 40 or something like that is when it's mentioned the first time. It's really early on. And
because it's mentioning her only possessions.
Yep. Yeah. There it is. I've been here the whole time, as Sam Reich would say. A little game changer joke for you guys there at home. Anyway. All right. So Sazed spends time here in the Conjure home studying his religion, the Terrace religion. And man, this chapter is really intense analysis of Sazed's faith in a great way. The idea of chance, of religion and belief, and the decision inherent between his contradictory beliefs that he's holding at the moment are just fantastic. They've been alluded to in the chapters before as we've spoken about them, but I really like how hard he's trying to, you know, he can't have it both ways, but he is trying so hard to have it both ways.
This just feels like such a great resolution to Sazed's like religious journey here. And thinking back on it, it was really frustrating how stuck he got on the raw logic of everything. Like, he's just been shooting himself in the foot the entire goddamn time. You know?
Right.
So
yeah,
it's a nice way to kind of bring that to a head.
Yeah, I adore it. I think that it's a fantastic way of kind of thinking about the whole thing. And like you said, it kind of brings it to a head. The reflection on the contract that Sazed has regarding the first and their reverence or lack thereof, I think, is kind of a really clever one because they knew Rashik as this man, you know, it's less a holy document and more, this was the dictation of the plan. It's now our time, like a crew, like Kelsier's crew, to enact the plan. And it's just a different degree of, you know, a different layer. And now the fact that the mists are now missing, the Conjure are in disarray, especially in regards to the mists' sudden absence and what that means for the coming days. It's to be the day of the resolution, their species' mass suicide, as we talked about in the beginning of the novel. What do you make of the first conclusion and kind of the argument that happens here?
So, first of all, the first contract. I don't know why I never made this connection. The name, the first contract. This is the contract with the first generation.
Yeah.
It's not like that's all that means. That's where that connection.
It's also the first contract. Yes. It's both.
Yeah. Okay. So there's that. Anyway, the comparison between the first and the crew is something that really, really stuck with me.
Okay.
I'd like to dig deeper and see if there's something even more spooky about it. But
spooky specifically, like spook
specific, like, well,
okay.
Yes, specifically and generally.
I know, I'm just kidding.
No, but if there's something driving that sort of group of people, and if there's an even tighter comparison between the two, like if this is like an external force pulling these people together, I don't know. We'll find out. As far as the resolution goes, I think they're jumping to a conclusion a little bit too hastily. Based on what they say here, the verbiage is that they must remove the blessings.
Mm-hmm.
And they attribute that to suicide. That's not stated as far as I can tell.
Right, right.
Do they know for sure that this would kill them?
I don't know.
And
I think that's the assumption.
Like they are constantly asserting that they are of preservation, not of ruin. So much like Vin removing her earring and having access to the mists, with them removing their spikes in a time when like this mist shit's going crazy, potentially just give them access to the power of preservation through the mists, like Vin is able to access. Because then the spike's not there anymore. There's nothing tying ruin to it. I think really it's just a misunderstanding of what those spikes actually do and how they would interact with the world as it stands currently. Maybe that would kill them in the past when there's not like a surge in preservation power. Yeah. I think I keep saying perseverance.
You've only done it twice over the last 2 episodes, so you're fine.
Okay. I don't know why.
I've cut it. You're fine.
Fair. But yeah, that's my thought right now is they're going to remove their spikes. Some of them will and realize, oh shit, this isn't mass suicide at all. This is
something different.
Something different. Because what would be the Lord Ruler's motivation for doing that? Maybe stopping ruin from like taking control of them?
I assume that's the rationale, but
yeah,
because maybe if he gets close enough, he can see them and then could take control of them and then have a, army of shape-shifting dudes.
Right. But
I guess the other part of that though, that would be odd is because it's so close to the end. What's he going to do? He's already exploding the world. Like, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
right.
They're the ones kind of keeping his body secret and safe.
But if he knows where to look, maybe he can, then he can pull through and influence through the force of metal. So
it could be, but
it's my assumption at the very least. So
that's fair.
Yeah. So we go from
a lot of scattershot thoughts, but
I think they were all really good. I think especially, that, like you said, that adamancy that they're of preservation and ruin. I think it's even more deeply interesting because the terracemen were of preservation, right? Like the terracemen were people, and as being people, they had preservation inside of them. And so then when they were turned into mist wraiths, they were of preservation, then they got spiked. Like it's maybe a little bit of a misconception that they've carried through time because of, their origins. And that kind of ties together nicely with this reveal now that we know that they're terracemen or that they were terracemen.
Right.
And even the reveal that like tear is another word for preservation in the language was like, nice.
Mm-hmm.
Even though there was no way that we could know that, it was just like a little salt packet of flavor on top of the whole thing.
Yeah. Maybe Riss is ruin.
Yeah. Interesting.
So
Terrorists. We'll see. But then the chapter ends with a rebellion familiar thing that Sazed knows quite a bit about, as well as a coup, of which Sazed also knows quite a bit about, by the second generation, who are aiming to take the power of the first and prevent this mass suicide resolution from occurring. Canpar fears this instability, and that is ever present in what he's decided to do here by removing the power from the firsts and taking over, preventing the resolution from taking place or being further announced or scaring the other generations for something that they ultimately feel isn't necessary. What do you think of this way to go out?
I really don't think I can fault him for that. I mean, I can fault him for other stuff. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But if he genuinely believes that his people are being misled to their doom, I can't fault that.
I think my issue with Canpar is that he's ignorant to facts. He's ignorant to the things like the mist falling and the mist having disappeared or the ash falling at extra levels, and is very, to me, in a strange way. And I know that we talked about this a long time ago inside of the episode, but he feels like the climate denier, like he feels like a climate denier version, but for, the end of the world. So while I think that there is a version of Canpar that I could not fault if someone proclaimed this without maybe a little bit more evidence, I think this version of Canpar I can completely fault.
That's a good point. That's a fair argument.
Yeah, he just feels a little too... I had never drawn the climate denier comparison before, but now I can't fucking help it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's good. But yeah. Cool. Yeah. Other thoughts? Head empty?
Head empty.
Head empty. All right.
Got to fill the next section.
True. This is the last week that we end with a logbook, which is interesting. So here we go. I've always wondered about the strange ability allomancers have to pierce the mists. When one burned tin, he or she could see further at night, looking through the mists. To the layman, this might seem like a logical connection. Tin, after all, enhances the senses. We are the layman in this picture. The logical mind, however, may find a puzzle in this ability. How exactly would tin let one see through the mists? As an obstruction, they are unconnected with the quality of one's eyesight. Both the nearsighted scholar and the long-sighted scholar would have the same trouble seeing into distance if there were a wall in the way. This, then, should have been our first clue. Allomancers could see through the mists because the mists were indeed composed of this very same power as allomancy. Once attuned by burning tin, the allomancer was almost part of the mists. Therefore, they became more translucent to him.
Yeah. So I had actually thought about this earlier on, and I explained it away for myself by reckoning that it wasn't like fog, and it wasn't particulate like that. And it was something entirely different that you could kind of see through for a little while. Mm-hmm. So I feel, I don't know, kind of validated in a way after reading this.
I remember us having the conversation specifically in like maybe the first or second episode about the mists and like, what? Like when Vin was able to see through them for the first time. And I do remember you kind of having that thought and like going through and I'm like, the tin lets her see through it. And you're like, oh, okay. And you just kind of went with it after that point. And it's like, yeah, we all kind of just go with it, don't we? We just buy in.
I don't remember it from that far back. I remember it from like thinking about it with.
Well, I think
maybe it was.
I think in the Will of Ascension, you also brought it up at some point because I think it was it was a couple of times you'd brought up. I mean, we were talking about the mists all the time through all these books, so it's always there.
Natural. I say things and forget them constantly. So
true. Yeah. All right, man. Well, cool. Mm-hmm. That's the end of this week's reading. This has been a long episode. It's the longest one for a while for sure. I hope you guys all have enjoyed it. With that, next week, we finish The Hero of Ages as well as Era 1 of Mistborn. So from here to the end, baby. It's all game.
Here to the end.
It's all fair game. Not next week, but the week following in our wrap-up episode. Feel free, we talked about this previously. Send us any questions, anything that you want us to answer. We've got a good thread going in the Discord. I've got a bunch on Twitter. I've got a couple in the Instagram DMs. So we've got some questions, but if you've got kind of another weekish to get those in to us, week and a half-ish, and yeah, then we'll be answering those. So that's where we'll leave you for this week.
Thank you, as ever, to our producers, Tim and Andrew, for helping us keep the show going. You can check out all of the links in our show notes, where you can find our schedule, Patreon, previous episodes, websites, all of the social media accounts in one very nice, convenient location.
Yeah, and as PJ said, make sure you give those a check-see. And if you haven't listened to it, go listen to the previous episode where we talk through what we're going to be doing in the future, as well as what we think Lightbringer and Red God relate to. Give that a listen. If you want to send us any of those questions or anything like that that we said earlier, Words Whiskey Pod on Twitter, Instagram, or Reddit, or you can email us directly at wordsandwhiskeyshow@gmail.com. You can contact us at patreon.com/wordsandwhiskey if you want to join our patronship and join us on the Discord and have conversations with us. We chat a lot there. We're there pretty frequently. You can also get merch at TeePublic. We even have baby onesies, so you can get a baby onesie with little scamp on it. Check them out. It's a couple of cool designs. We have a new one that'll be coming out soon, made by the wonderful, the illustrious PB Doodles, that we should be getting up there probably near the end of Era 1, maybe the beginning of Era 2. So I've got it. I just need to do it. But
it'll be great.
Very cool. Beyond that, make sure you leave all the podcasts that you love a little review ski if you haven't already. Give them that 5-star, give them that comment, or else Aaron's going to come for you. Can you believe, like, in a couple of months, you guys are all going to get threatened by Aaron every single episode to do this? I'm the kind one here. You're about to get bad copped really hard.
Oh, it's going to be good.
Yeah, it'll be very funny. All right. Thank you all so much for the support, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.